What's up, guys? Danielle Avari from VSiN, joined today by Adam Burke, also from VSiN. If you have read an article on VSiN.com, you've probably read something that Adam has written because he writes everything, but I know he's a big baseball fan if you can't tell by his background. So, Adam, thank you so much for joining us to talk some Major League Baseball.
Absolutely. Very interesting start to the season for sure, with a lot of different things from previous seasons. So we got plenty to talk about here.
Absolutely. And I think that it's interesting because baseball is a lower bet sport relative, of course, to basketball and football. I think the new rule changes may help that a little bit. Obviously, trying to make the games a little bit shorter as well. So they have all these new rules they've introduced this season. The pitch clock being one that comes to mind, of course, that I know some pitchers have already started to say they're not a big fan of. The bigger bases and also that defensive shift ban as well. So from what you've seen so far early in this season, how have those new rules affected betting?
Yeah, so there are two statistics really that I've noticed so far here this season. The first is the stolen base rate. The stolen base success rate going into action on Wednesday was 81%. That's the highest it's been in a long time. That's well above what the traditional break-even rate is for stealing bases, around 72, 73%. So that has definitely increased scoring. And the other thing I've noticed is the walk rate, the base on balls percentage, is the highest it's been since 2000. So I think that's a byproduct of the pitch clock and pitchers just not really being, not having enough time to compose themselves, kind of having to hurry sometimes through their signs, through talking to the catcher, all of that. So I think those are two things that probably aren't going to go away. I know at times, pitchers have issues with their control early on in the season anyway, but I think this is more related to the pitch clock. And, it's creating more base runners. It's creating more runners in scoring position. 32% of base runners have scored. That's the highest number since 2000. So offense is definitely up as a result of these rule changes.
And it's funny you mentioned the stolen bases because I immediately, of course, want to check what you can bet on these. And if you bet over one stolen base on a lot of these players, it's like 10-1. I mean, the shortest I'm seeing is 5-1. So that would be kind of a fun thing to look at, too. Pay attention to which players have been attempting to go to those huge new bases. Also, as far as the pitch clock, I know you said that the pitchers at the start of the year can look this way anyways. And again, they've been pitching their way on their own time for so long. Is this something that as things go on and they get used to the pitch clock, we could see things kind of shore up a bit?
It's possible. And also, you get some cold weather early on in the year and that makes it difficult to grip the baseball. So maybe that leads to, a few more walks. But I really think the pitch clock, the inability to compose yourself, in high leverage situations with men on base, stuff like that, I think that's something that's going to stick around for quite a while here, and especially be an even bigger issue when the ball is carrying a little bit farther once the weather warms up. So I think it may be something that we continue to see as we go throughout the season, and maybe we see more impacts of the shift ban. We haven't seen a ton as of yet, but that could be something that we see a little bit more going forward as well. So yeah, I've seen a lot of people out there in the social media sphere not only betting the stolen base props, but also betting walk props with pitchers. A lot of the player prop stuff, over 1.5, over 2.5 walks, stuff like that. Those things can be pretty juicy. There could be a lot of vig on some of those bets, but I have seen a lot of people trying to attack those from a player prop standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk about these pitchers as well. Even some of the veteran ones have kind of mentioned that they've gotten fatigued doing this pitch clock. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I have noticed. You mentioned Carlos Carrasco before we started recording here. That's a guy that had a velocity drop over his first couple of starts. Max Scherzer had one as well. It's just a little bit more difficult to maintain your velocity because you have less recovery time between pitches. You're probably going to be throwing more high-stress pitches with men on base. I also think that as we go forward here, that's something to follow with relievers and maybe a live betting angle or something like that, because relievers are going to wear down, and especially if they don't have that same recovery time. If nothing else, managers may try to not use guys back-to-back days as we get deeper into the season, so they won't have their full bullpens at their disposal. I think these rule changes, I think we expected more offense just in general, but the manner in which we've had more offense and what the longer-term impacts could be, I think that's what we really need to start thinking about now.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought up the bullpens because we go way back to the Los Angeles City Cast. You don't even know, guys. But we used to talk about the Dodgers, the Angels, and whenever we talked about baseball, you talked about handicapping the bullpen. And I think it seems obvious, but I think a lot of people just look to even as simple as betting listed pitcher on games, right? Just who's starting. But you really have to look deeper when you're going to bet a full game side of things. And so I'm glad you're bringing the bullpen into this, because that's just a good reminder for people as well. And then one last thing I want to touch on, not necessarily rule related, but last year there was a lot of discussion that the ball looked deadened. It was pretty obvious. How does it look to you this year?
So far, I mean, I personally haven't really noticed anything. The average fly ball distance was actually a little bit lower. It was kind of lagging behind previous seasons. However, people smarter than me that know a lot more about science than I do were saying that the drag on the baseball appears to be a little bit lower. So now that we're getting into the warmer months where the ball is going to carry better, well, the ball carries well in humidity too. If there is less of a drag coefficient on the baseball, it's going to carry more. So that may just have been early season sample size noise with the cold weather, stuff like that. But there are some people that are thinking that, home runs will be going up as the temperatures do.
That's exciting, because we've already seen a lot of overs. We'll talk about that in another video. If you want to see that, make sure you subscribe to the VSiN Live YouTube. And as always, you can check out Adam's work at vsin.com and follow him on Twitter at skatingtripods. Thank you, Adam.
Always fun.